The alien diplomat's three eyes widened as Commander Jake Murphy slammed his fist on the polished obsidian table. The galactic console chamber fell silent. 12 species represented, each more ancient than humanity's entire civilization, and not one of them had expected this response. "You misunderstand your position, human." Ambassador Thrall clicked through his translator, his crystalline form shifting colors to indicate displeasure. "Earth has been scheduled for resource extraction. Your protests are noted but irrelevant. 26 colony worlds have already been processed this cycle." Jake's jaw tightened. Behind him, Lieutenant Amy Brooks kept her hand steady near her sidearm. Though both new weapons were meaningless here, they were 3,000 light-years from home, surrounded by beings who could atomize their ship with a thought. But that wasn't the point. "You're not listening," Jake said, his voice dropping to something colder than the void outside. "I'm not protesting. I'm warning you." The Vryn representative, a floating mass of tentacles and bioluminescent organs, pulsed with what their species considered laughter. "Warning? Your species discovered faster than light travel 43 of your years ago. We have navigated the stars for 60,000. Your warning is as meaningful as an insect challenging a storm." Jake pulled a data crystal from his uniform pocket and placed it on the table. 3 months ago, you sent a survey fleet to our outer colonies. 12 ships. They began mining operations on Titan's moons without permission. "A standard procedure," Trell responded. "Unaffiliated worlds are common resources under Galactic Law Article 794. Those moons weren't unaffiliated. They were ours. We'd already established settlements there." Jake tapped the crystal. "Your survey fleet is gone. All 12 ships." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien sounds. "Impossible!" Several translators spat out simultaneously. "Earth didn't possess weapons capable of destroying console military vessels. Their technology was primitive, barely qualifying for observation status, let alone combat engagement. I suggest you review the data," Amy said quietly, stepping forward. Her eyes swept the assembled aliens with the same expression she'd worn during the Mars Rebellion, when she'd held a bunker against 1,000 rioters with nothing but determination and a rifle with 6 rounds. "Then reconsider your extraction schedule." Threll's form darkened to an angry crimson. "If humans have developed weapons that can threaten console vessels, then your species represents a clear and present danger to galactic peace. The Council will have no choice but to respond with overwhelming force." "That's not a threat," Jake said. "That's exactly what we're counting on." The Vryn ambassador's bioluminescence flickered in confusion. "You want us to attack Earth? Your homeworld?" "No," Jake smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "I want you to try." He activated the crystal. Holographic images filled the chamber. The console survey fleet hung in space around Titan's largest moon, their massive dreadnoughts dwarfing the small human mining stations below. Then the stations exploded. Not from weapons fire or sabotage, but from deliberate overloads. Nuclear reactors went critical simultaneously. Fusion cores breached their containment. The detonations created a chain reaction that consumed everything within 100 kilometers, including the console ships caught in the blast radius. "Suicide attacks," Thrall said dismissively. "Desperate and primitive." "Look closer," Amy suggested. The hologram continued. From the expanding debris field, small objects emerged. Hundreds of them. They looked like escape pods, but they moved with purpose, tracking the console vessels that had pulled back from the initial explosions. Each pod accelerated to impossible speeds, driven by engines that burned so hot they showed white on infrared scans. The console ships opened fire. Point defense systems that could track and destroy meteors moving at fractional light speed filled space with energy beams and projectiles. They destroyed dozens of the pods, but there were too many, and they were too fast, too maneuverable. They swarmed like insects, like angry hornets defending their nest. When the first pod hit a console dreadnought, it punched through the shields as if they weren't there. The ship's hull held for exactly 2 seconds before the pod's payload detonated. The explosion was small, barely visible on the hologram scale, but the dreadnought broke apart like a toy, its spine severed, its fusion core exposed to vacuum. The other pods found their targets within minutes. 12 console ships, each representing centuries of technological development and millions of credits and resources, reduced to expanding clouds of debris and frozen atmosphere. "What did you use?" The question came from Ambassador Kelth, a reptilian species known for their military expertise. His voice carried something the translator couldn't quite capture, but Jake recognized it well enough. Respect, grudging and uncomfortable. but respect nonetheless. "Nothing you'd find impressive," Jake said. Kinetic impactors wrapped around fusion warheads with human pilots guiding them in. No fancy energy shields, no exotic particles. Just mass, velocity, and determination. "Pilots," Thurwell repeated. "You sent living beings on suicide missions." "Volunteers," Amy corrected. "Every single one. We put out a call and we had to turn away thousands. Humans who understood that sometimes you have to show the universe exactly what you're willing to do to protect your home." Jake leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. "Here's what you need to understand about humanity. We're not the oldest species. We're not the most advanced. We don't have your energy weapons or your quantum drives or your matter replicators. What we have is 7 billion people who all agree on one thing. Nobody takes our home without a fight. You cannot stand against the full might of the Consul," Thrall insisted, though his color had faded to an uncertain purple. "We command fleets that number in the thousands. Weapons that can sterilize worlds. If you force our hand, Earth will burn." "Maybe," Jake acknowledged. "But how many of your ships will we take with us? How many of your worlds will we target in response? You've got faster-than-light travel. So do we. You've got big ships and powerful weapons. We've got 7 billion angry humans who just learned that aliens exist and want to take their planet. Do you really want to find out what we're capable of when we're fighting for survival?" The silence in the chamber stretched like taffy. These beings had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They'd absorbed hundreds of species into their confederation, always with the same mix of incentives and threats: join willingly and prosper, or resist and be absorbed anyway. It was the natural order, the way things had always been. But they'd never encountered a species quite like humanity before. Young, reckless, and absolutely unwilling to accept the natural order if it meant surrendering their autonomy. "This council will deliberate," Thrall finally said. "You will wait outside." Jake and Amy turned to leave, but the commander paused at the doorway. "One more thing. Those 12 ships? That was us being gentle. That was us proving a point with minimal casualties. If you come for Earth, we won't be gentle. We'll be everything you fear we might be, and worse. So please, for both our sakes, do not mess with Earth." The door sealed behind them with a hiss of equalizing pressure. In the corridor beyond, Amy let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Think they bought it?" she asked. Jake's expression remained neutral. "We're about to find out if humanity's greatest bluff in history pays off or if we just signed our death warrant." 3 hours later, the Council's decision came through. Earth and its colonies were to be granted provisional sovereignty pending a full technological and military assessment. The extraction schedule was indefinitely postponed. It wasn't recognition as an equal power, not yet. But it was a start. As their shuttle accelerated away from the Consul station, Amy pulled up the casualty reports from the Titan incident. 47 volunteers. Gone in an instant. 47 humans who'd strapped themselves to bombs and flown into alien warships because someone needed to prove that humanity wouldn't go quietly into exploitation. "They'll be remembered," Jake said softly, reading over her shoulder. "Every single one. Heroes who saved the Earth without anyone on Earth even knowing they were in danger." Amy closed the report. "And if the Council calls our bluff? If they come with those thousands of ships?" Jake stared out at the stars, at the vast darkness between them that humanity had only just begun to explore. "Then we make good on every threat I just made. We fight them in space, in orbit, on the ground. We make them pay for every meter they take. And we show the galaxy that humans don't have the biggest guns or the best technology." "But we have something better," Amy prompted. "We have spite," Jake said with a grim smile. "Never underestimate what humans can accomplish when they're properly motivated by spite." The shuttle's engines flared brighter as they jumped to faster-than-light speeds, carrying 2 humans and a message back to Earth. The message was simple. Humanity had walked into the galactic community, and nobody was quite sure what to make of them yet. But one thing was certain. Earth was off the menu. At least for now. And that was all the time humanity needed to make sure it stayed that way. 6 months passed since Commander Jake Murphy's ultimatum to the Galactic Consul. Earth's governments, finally brought into the loop about the crisis that had nearly consumed their world, reacted with predictable chaos. Panic in the streets gave way to angry demands for protection, which evolved into a militarization effort that made the old Cold War look like a disagreement between neighbors. The Unity Defense Initiative formed within weeks. Every nation contributed what it could. Scientists who'd spent careers arguing over research grants now worked shoulder to shoulder in bunkers carved beneath Antarctica's ice. Engineers who'd designed civilian spacecraft retrofitted them with weapons that shouldn't exist according to any physics textbook the console had bothered to share. Captain Ryan Foster stood on the bridge of the Defiant, humanity's first true warship designed with alien contact in mind. It wasn't elegant like the sweeping curves of console vessels. It was angular, brutal, and covered in enough armor plating to stop a comet. Beneath that armor lay experimental weapons, fusion drives that could push the ship to 90% of light speed, and a crew of 200 humans who'd volunteered knowing the survival rate for first contact military operations was statistically terrible. Contact on long-range sensors, Lieutenant Chris Matthews called from the tactical station. Multiple signatures, bearing 270, distance approximately 4 light minutes. Configuration matches console frigate class, count as 7 vessels. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. 7 ships. Not an invasion fleet, but not a diplomatic mission either. Communications. Broadcast on all standard frequencies. Let them know we see them. Already receiving a transmission, Captain, Lieutenant Kate Williams reported from comms. They're requesting permission to approach Earth. They say they're a delegation sent to formalize the treaty terms. Are there scouts mapping our defenses before the real fleet arrives? Chris muttered, his hands already plotting firing solutions. The Defiant's main railgun could punch a tungsten slug through a mountain at relativistic speeds. Against shields designed to stop energy weapons, kinetic bombardment was humanity's ace in the hole. But 7 ships, each individually capable of glassing a continent, meant any engagement would be suicide unless they had overwhelming advantage. Steady, Ryan ordered. Let's not start a war before we hear what they have to say. But get me Admiral Price on Secure Channel. I want the Mars defense grid on standby and tell the Luna batteries to go to alert condition red. Across the solar system, humanity's crash course in self-defense kicked into high gear. On Mars, converted mining lasers powerful enough to cut through kilometers of rock rotated toward the incoming console vessels. On Luna, mass drivers originally designed to launch ore into orbit, realigned to launch anything the console ships couldn't dodge. And in high Earth orbit, 73 armed stations that hadn't existed 7 months ago powered up the reactor cores and armed weapons that had never been test-fired outside of computer simulations. The console delegation, if that's what it really was, maintained steady approach vector. They made no aggressive moves, activated no weapon systems that Earth's newly upgraded sensors could detect, but Ryan had read the reports from Jake Murphy's encounter. The console didn't need to be aggressive. Their mere presence was a threat. Captain, Admiral Price on Secure Channel, Kate announced. Admiral Lisa Price's face appeared on the main screen. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, which was probably accurate. Captain Foster, status of the delegation? Maintaining peaceful approach, Admiral. No hostile actions detected, but they're getting close to optimal firing range for their plasma batteries. Understood. You are authorized to engage if they deviate from agreed-upon approach vector by more than 0.01%. Otherwise, let them come. We need to see if they're serious about negotiation, or if Murphy's bluff just bought us time to prepare for the real fight. Yes, ma'am. And if they are serious, if they actually want to negotiate? Lisa's expression hardened. Then we negotiate from strength. Every demand they make, we push back. Every concession they want, they pay for. The days of humanity rolling over because we're not the most advanced species are over. We've got teeth now, and we're going to make damn sure the galaxy knows we're willing to bite. The channel closed. Ryan turned back to his crew, seeing the tension in every face. They were trained, equipped, and motivated, but they were also terrified. Because unlike the volunteers who'd piloted those fusion-tipped kinetic impactors into console dreadnoughts, they had time to think about what might happen. All hands, this is the captain, Ryan said over the ship-wide intercom. You all know what's at stake. 7 console ships are approaching, claiming they want to talk. Maybe that's true. Maybe they've realized that humans are more trouble than we're worth and they're here to formalize our independence. Or maybe they're here to test our defenses before bringing in the real fleet. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Either way, we're the line. If they cross us, if they try anything, we're the ones who have to stop them. Not because we're the biggest or the toughest or the most advanced, but because we're human, and humans don't give up. We don't surrender. We fight. And if we have to die today, we die knowing that we bought Earth one more day, one more hour, one more minute to prepare. The intercom went silent, but Ryan could feel the shift in the ship's atmosphere. Fear transformed into determination. Anxiety hardened into resolve. His crew wasn't ready to die, but they were ready to do what was necessary. That was all anyone could ask. The console vessels entered visual range 40 minutes later. They were beautiful in an alien way, their hulls composed of some material that seemed to shift between solid matter and flowing energy. Each ship was easily twice the Defiant's size, radiating power signatures that made Earth's best warship look like a rowboat facing down yachts. "They're hailing us," Kate reported. "Audio only, no visual. Put them through." Static crackled, then a voice emerged. The translator matrix installed during the hasty retrofit converted the alien speech into flat, emotionless English. "Human vessel Defiant. This is Ambassador Kelth of the Vren Collective, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Consul. We request permission to establish standard diplomatic orbit around your homeworld." Ryan recognized the name. Kelth had been at Murphy's confrontation, one of the few who'd seemed to understand that humanity was serious. That was either very good or very bad. "Ambassador Kelth, this is Captain Ryan Foster. Before we grant any permissions, I need assurances. What is the purpose of your delegation?" "To negotiate the terms of Earth's integration into the Consul as a sovereign member state with full voting rights and territorial protections." The bridge went quiet. Chris looked up from tactical, his expression skeptical. Kate's fingers hesitated over her console. Even Ryan needed a moment to process that. "Integration?" Ryan said carefully. "Last I heard, you were planning to strip mine our colonies for resources." "The situation has changed," Kelth replied. "Your species has demonstrated both capability and resolve. The Council has concluded that humanity represents a potential asset, rather than a resource to be extracted. However, this conclusion comes with conditions." "Of course it does," Ryan muttered, then raised his voice. "What conditions?" "You will submit to a full technological assessment. You will share data on the weapons used to destroy the survey fleet. You will accept Consul observers on your primary military installations. And you will agree to restrictions on aggressive expansion into space already claimed by existing member states." Each word felt like a trap. "Share their weapons data," which meant the Consul could develop counters. "Accept observers," which meant spies with legal authority. Restrictions on expansion, which meant humanity would be locked into the solar system while other species explored the galaxy freely. "Those aren't conditions," Ryan said flatly. "Those are surrender terms dressed up in diplomatic language." "Those are the requirements for membership," Kelth corrected. "Without them, you remain an unaffiliated species subject to standard resource allocation protocols. With them, Earth gains protection, access to advanced technology, and a voice in galactic governance." Ryan muted the channel and turned to his crew. "Opinions?" "It's a trick," Chris said immediately. "They're trying to defang us. Once they know how our weapons work, they can counter them. Once they've got observers everywhere, they'll know our weaknesses. And restrictions on expansion means we're trapped while they prepare for round 2. "Maybe," Kate said slowly. "Or maybe they're actually scared. Think about it. They've ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, absorbing everyone they meet. And then we show up, refuse to play by their rules, and blow up their ships using technology they consider primitive. That has to be terrifying from their perspective. So what, we just trust them?" Chris demanded. "No," Kate said, "but we use their fear. We negotiate. We push back on every point. We make them work for every concession. And we make it clear that if they're lying, if this is some elaborate trap, then we'll make them regret it." Ryan considered both arguments. Chris was right to be suspicious. The Consul had proven they couldn't be trusted. But Kate was also right. Fear could be leveraged. And if there was even a chance this was genuine, walking away meant war. "Reopen channel," he ordered. Kelth's voice returned. "Captain, have you conferred with your leadership?" "I'm conferring with them now," Ryan said. "And here's what Earth's leadership is going to tell you. We're willing to discuss membership, but not on those terms. You want our weapons data? Then you share yours. Equal exchange, nothing held back. You want observers on our installations? We get observers on yours with the same access and authority. And as for expansion restrictions, we'll agree not to claim systems already occupied by member species, but anything else is fair game. We're not going to be pinned into one solar system while the rest of you carve up the galaxy." Silence stretched across the communication channel. Ryan could almost hear the mental gears turning as Kelth consulted with whatever superiors were monitoring this conversation. Seconds felt like hours. "Your counterproposal is outside my authorization to accept," Kelth finally said. However, I am willing to present it to the Council. This will require several days of deliberation. May we establish orbit and send a small delegation to Earth's surface for more detailed negotiations? You can establish orbit at lunar distance, no closer, and your delegation will consist of no more than 5 individuals, unarmed and accompanied by human security at all times. Any deviation from approved locations will be considered a hostile act and responded to accordingly. Agreed. Transmitting orbital parameters now. Captain Foster, I hope you understand that not all console species supported the initial decision regarding Earth. Some of us recognize the value of a species that refuses to be dominated. Is that supposed to make me feel better about you planning to strip mine our colonies? It is supposed to make you understand that the console is not a monolith. There are factions, political currents, species with competing interests. Your defiance has strengthened those of us who believe the old ways of forced integration are inefficient and morally questionable. You have allies in the Council, whether you know it or not. The channel closed. Ryan slumped back in his command chair, feeling the weight of the last hour pressing down on him. They'd survived first contact. Earth hadn't been vaporized. But the hard part was just beginning. Navigation. Escort them to the designated orbit, he ordered. Tactical. Maintain weapons lock on all 7 vessels. If any of them so much as twitches wrong, I want solutions ready. Communications, get me Admiral Price again. She needs to know we're about to host alien diplomats who might be sincere or might be planning to assassinate every world leader we have. You think they'd try that? Kate asked. Ryan thought about Jake Murphy's report, about the casual way the Consul had discussed processing 26 colony worlds, about the fundamental alien mindset that saw resource extraction as more important than sovereignty. I think they're used to getting what they want, one way or another. And I think we just became the species that said no. That makes us either inspiration or a threat, depending on who you ask. So what do? We watch them. We listen. We negotiate. And we keep our guns loaded and our eyes open, because the moment we let our guard down is the moment they'll test whether humanity's defiance was real or just a convincing bluff. The Consul delegation settled into lunar orbit. 5 aliens descended to Earth's surface in a shuttle that made human engineering look like stone tools, and across every screen, every broadcast, every news feed on the planet, humanity watched as their government prepared to sit down with representatives of a civilization that had nearly ended theirs. The first true test of humanity's place in the galaxy was about to begin, and everyone knew that the wrong word, the wrong gesture, the wrong negotiating position could mean the difference between survival and extinction. But humans had faced long odds before. They'd stared down predators with nothing but rocks and determination. They'd crossed oceans in wooden ships when everyone said it was impossible. They'd split atoms, walked on the moon, and cured diseases that had plagued their species for millennia. And now they told the rulers of the galaxy to back off or face the consequences. Maybe they'd survive this. Maybe they wouldn't. But either way, the galaxy was going to learn what 7 billion humans could accomplish when they decided that surrender wasn't an option. The negotiations began in Geneva, in a facility hastily converted from hosting international climate summits to hosting representatives from species that considered humanity barely worth noticing. Secretary General Helen Martinez led Earth's delegation, flanked by military advisors, xenobiologists, and linguists who'd spent 6 months learning everything they could about Consul culture from the limited data Jake Murphy had transmitted. Ambassador Kelth arrived with 4 other representatives, a crystalline being named Thrall who'd been at the original confrontation, still radiating displeasure and shifting purple hues, a floating colony organism called Vess who communicated through synchronized bioluminescent patterns, a heavily armored Kryn warrior named Drac, whose species apparently specialized in military matters. And finally, a small, almost delicate creature named Pip from the Center Collective, whose role remained mysterious. "Let us begin," Kelth said through the translator. His reptilian form settled onto a specially designed chair that accommodated his physiology. The Galactic Consul extends greetings to Earth and acknowledges humanity's request for sovereign membership status. Request implies we're asking for permission, Helen replied calmly. We're not. We're claiming what should have been offered from the moment you discovered our civilization. The right to self-determination. Rel's crystalline structure flashed angry red. Your species barely qualifies as a civilization, by Consul standards. You've had space travel for less than a century. You've engaged in numerous conflicts that nearly destroyed your own world. You possess no significant scientific achievements beyond what 100 other species accomplished millennia ago. And yet, Helen said, leaning forward. "We destroyed 12 of your survey ships with technology you consider primitive. That suggests your standards might need recalibrating." "A desperate gambit using suicide tactics," Thrall countered. "Hardly indicative of a civilization capable of contributing to galactic governance." "It was indicative of a civilization willing to die rather than submit," Admiral Price interjected from Helen's right. "And if you think that was desperate, you clearly haven't studied human history. We've been refining the art of stubborn defiance for 10,000 years." Vess pulsed with patterns that the translator rendered as thoughtful consideration. "The question before this delegation is not humanity's past, but their future. Can a species so young integrate into structures that have existed for epochs? Can beings who value individual freedom over collective efficiency accept the compromises required for galactic citizenship? Can species who value collective efficiency over individual freedom accept that some of us prefer to make our own mistakes rather than follow someone else's rules?" Helen countered. "Because that's really what this is about, isn't it? You're used to being in charge. You're used to everyone acknowledging your superiority and falling in line. We didn't." Pip spoke for the first time, their voice surprisingly deep for such a small creature. "You oversimplify. The console exists because the alternative is chaos. Thousands of species, each pursuing their own interests, would inevitably lead to conflict, resource depletion, and extinction events. We provide order, stability, and shared prosperity." "At the cost of autonomy," Helen said. "At the cost of forcing everyone to accept your definition of prosperity. Tell me, how many of your member species actually chose to join? How many were given the option to say no and have that refusal respected?" Silence fell across the negotiating table. Admiral Price smiled grimly. "They'd hit a nerve. The choice was always present," Kelth said carefully. "Join and receive the benefits of advanced technology, extended lifespans, protection from cosmic threats, or remain isolated, facing the challenges of space alone." "That's not a choice," Helen said. "That's coercion with a diplomatic veneer. Join us or face extinction, because we're certainly not going to help you if you refuse." "How many species chose isolation and later found themselves absorbed anyway when some crisis made them vulnerable?" "I grow tired of this philosophical debate," Drake rumbled, their armored form shifting with barely contained aggression. "You are here to negotiate terms of membership, not to critique council policy. State your requirements or we conclude that humanity is simply stalling." Helen pulled up a holographic display, Earth's proposal floating above the conference table in crisp detail. "Fine, here are our terms. 1. Mutual technology sharing on an equal basis. You teach us, we teach you. No restrictions, no classified information, complete transparency. 2. Equal representation in console governance. One species, one vote, regardless of age or size. 3. Autonomous military forces under Earth command. We'll coordinate with console defense initiatives, but we maintain independent command structure and rules of engagement. 4. Unrestricted expansion into unclaimed space. We agree not to encroach on existing territories, but anything else is available for human colonization. And 5. The right to withdraw from console membership if we determine the arrangement isn't working, with a guarantee of non-interference in human affairs following withdrawal." The alien delegates reacted simultaneously. Thrall's colors cycled through outraged crimsons and disgusted purples. Vess's bioluminescence spiked in patterns the translator couldn't parse. Drax's armor plates actually lifted slightly. A threat display. Only Kelth and Pip remained calm, though even Kelth's eyes narrowed to slits. "Impossible," Thrall said flatly. "These terms would make humanity equal to species that have navigated the stars since before your ancestors learned to use fire. It is an insult to suggest such equivalence." "Then don't accept the terms," Admiral Price said. "Walk away. Go back to your council and tell them humanity would rather stand alone than submit to second-class citizenship, and then pray we don't decide that the best defense is a good offense." "You threaten the consul?" Drax's translator added a growl that didn't need translation. "I'm reminding you that you're not the only ones with weapons," Price replied coldly. "You've got big ships and energy shields." "We've got 7 billion people who just learned that the galaxy is full of aliens who think Earth is theirs for the taking. Do you really want to see what we're capable of when we're motivated by existential threat?" "You would be annihilated," Thrall insisted. "The full military might of the console could sterilize every human world in a matter of days." "Probably," Ellen agreed. "But how many of your worlds would we take with us? We've had faster-than-light travel for 40 years now. We've been quietly mapping the galaxy while you thought we were just cute primitives exploring our neighborhood. We know where your major installations are. Your shipyards. Your population centers. Your replaceable cultural sites. And we've got enough angry humans who'd volunteer for one-way missions to make you seriously regret forcing that choice. She stood up, placing both hands on the table. So here's the reality. You can accept us as equals and gain a potentially valuable ally. Or you can try to force us into subordinate status and turn humanity into a permanent enemy willing to burn half the galaxy just to spite you. Those are your options. Choose wisely. Kelth raised a clawed hand, calling for calm before the situation deteriorated further. Secretary General Martinez, your proposal requires consideration at the highest levels. However, I can tell you immediately that several points are non-starters. Full military autonomy cannot be granted to a species with no track record of restraint. Unrestricted expansion risks conflicts with neighboring powers who have legitimate claims to border regions, and the right to withdraw undermines the entire concept of stable galactic governance. Then we're at an impasse, Helen said simply, 'cause humanity will not accept anything less than full sovereignty. We didn't claw our way to the top of Earth's food chain, survive ice ages and plagues and wars, and finally reach the stars just to become someone else's junior partners. Pride. Vess pulsed. Your species is driven by pride that exceeds your capabilities. Maybe, Helen acknowledged, or maybe we're driven by the understanding that freedom, once surrendered, is nearly impossible to reclaim. You want to know why we're so stubborn? Because we've seen what happens when people give up autonomy in exchange for safety. It never ends well. Pip spoke again, their small form somehow commanding attention. What if there was a middle path? A probationary membership, lasting perhaps 50 of your years. During this time, Earth maintains military autonomy and expansion rights within agreed boundaries. Technology sharing occurs gradually, with both sides having veto power over specific exchanges. And at the end of the probationary period, both parties assess whether full integration is mutually beneficial. The proposal hung in the air like a lifeline. It wasn't everything Earth wanted, but it was closer than anyone had expected. Helen glanced at Admiral Price, who gave the slightest nod. What are the terms of probationary membership? Helen asked carefully. Limited participation in consul governance. Observer status in most councils. Voting rights in matters that directly affect humanity. Mutual non-aggression guarantees with all member species. Access to standard technology packages, with advanced systems available based on demonstrated competency and need. And regular assessments to ensure both sides are honoring the spirit of the agreement. And if at the end of 50 years we decide full membership isn't in our interest, then humanity withdraws to sovereign status with the same non-interference guarantees you requested, Kelth said. The probationary period serves both our interests. It gives Earth time to prove you can be responsible galactic citizens, and it gives the consul time to adjust to the concept of a species that refuses to simply accept our authority. Helen considered it. 50 years. 2 generations of humans who would grow up with the consul as a known quantity rather than a terrifying unknown. Time to build proper defenses, to learn advanced technology, to establish humanity's place in the galaxy through achievement rather than just defiant threats. It wasn't surrender and it wasn't complete victory. It was compromise. We'll need to discuss this with Earth's governments, she said. But preliminary assessment, this is workable. Admiral? I want detailed definitions of expansion boundaries, Price said immediately, and clarification on what constitutes a threat requiring consul intervention versus something humanity handles independently. We're not joining just to have you override our decisions whenever it's convenient. Reasonable, Kelth agreed. Drac, you will work with the Admiral on military protocols. Threll, you will coordinate technology exchange parameters. Vess, you will help establish the governance framework for probationary membership. Pip and I will handle overall coordination and problem resolution. The meeting continued for hours, drilling down into specifics, arguing over definitions, negotiating the 1,000 tiny details that would determine whether this arrangement survived first contact with reality. But the fundamental breakthrough had occurred. Earth wouldn't be processed for resources. Humanity wouldn't be forced into subordinate status. They'd bought themselves time and opportunity, paid for with the courage of 47 volunteers who died proving humanity couldn't be pushed around. As the delegates finally adjourned, Helen found herself standing at the facility's observation window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere up there, billions of aliens were going about their lives, most of them completely unaware that a young species had just reshaped the galactic power structure through sheer stubborn refusal to accept the status quo. Admiral Price joined her at the window. Think it'll hold? For 50 years? Maybe. If we're smart, if we use this time to build real strength rather than just making threats we hope we never have to follow through on, and if the Council actually means what they're saying rather than planning to use the probationary period to find our weaknesses. So, trust but verify. Trust but verify, Helen agreed, and keep every weapon we have pointed at them, just in case verification reveals we shouldn't have trusted at all. Above them, the stars shone with the same light they'd always cast on Earth, but now they represented something different. Not just distant suns to wonder about, but neighbors to negotiate with, potential friends to learn from, and possible enemies to guard against. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage, and the performance was just beginning. 3 years into Earth's probationary membership in the Galactic Council, Lieutenant Commander Alex Parker guided his patrol ship through the Kepler system, a recently discovered stellar cluster rich with potentially habitable worlds. The Explorer-class vessel wasn't designed for combat, but 3 years of paranoia had convinced Earth's military that every ship needed teeth. So Alex's small crew of 12 operated a vessel with enough firepower to give even console frigates pause. Picking up a distress signal, Ensign Megan Clark called from communications. Source is bearing 185, distance approximately 2 light hours. Signal is weak, but recognizable as console standard emergency broadcast. Alex felt tension coil in his stomach. 3 years of probationary membership had been surprisingly peaceful. Technology exchanges proceeded according to schedule. Human colonies expanded into approved sectors. The console kept their distance, observing but not interfering. It had almost been too easy, which made everyone suspicious that the real test was still coming. Analysis? Signal identifies the source as the Centaur vessel Bright Future. Registry confirms it's a diplomatic courier. They report engine failure and life support degradation. Standard rescue protocol requests assistance from any console member vessel in range. We're the only ones in range? Alex asked. Megan checked her sensors. Closest console ship is the Vrin cruiser Depth of Wisdom, approximately 8 light hours away. They've acknowledged the distress call, but won't reach the Bright Future for at least 3 hours even at maximum speed. And life support degradation means... According to the signal, they've got maybe 90 minutes before atmospheric contamination reaches lethal levels. Alex pulled up the Kepler system map, calculating vectors and timing. The Bright Future was drifting near a gas giant's moon, their trajectory suggesting they'd been surveying the system when something catastrophic failed. His ship could reach them in 40 minutes, assess the situation, and potentially effect rescue before the Vrin cruiser arrived. Or it could be a trap, a test to see if humanity would actually help console members in distress, or if all the diplomatic niceties were just a facade covering species who couldn't be trusted. Worse, it could be an ambush designed to capture human technology or personnel for study. Tactical, what's the threat assessment? Alex asked. Lieutenant Brad Collins looked up from his station. Sensors show the Bright Future broadcasting exactly what they claim. A crippled ship with minimal power. But we're not equipped to detect every possible threat. They could have ships hiding in the gas giant's magnetic field. They could have weapons systems powered down waiting for us to get close. Or it could be exactly what it looks like. A ship in trouble that needs help. Commander, Megan said quietly. The Centaur are Pip species, the diplomat who helped negotiate our probationary membership. That complicated matters. Pip had been instrumental in finding the compromise that kept Earth from either war or subordinate status. If this was Pip's species in trouble, ignoring them would be both strategically foolish and morally questionable. Helm, set course for the Bright Future, maximum speed. Tactical, go to yellow alert and prepare for possible hostile contact. If this is a trap, I want us ready to fight our way out. Communications, transmit to the Bright Future that we're responding to their distress call and to the Vrin cruiser that we're taking point on the rescue. The ship's engines flared as they accelerated toward the crippled Centaur vessel. Alex pulled up everything their database had on the Centaur. Small beings, physically delicate, but possessing remarkable intelligence and diplomatic skill. They'd been among the first species to join the Council voluntarily, seeing the benefits of cooperation over isolation. Their ships were typically cutting-edge, built with experimental technology that pushed the boundaries of physics, which made a catastrophic failure simultaneously more and less suspicious. More because advanced ships shouldn't just break down. less because experimental technology was, by definition, unpredictable and prone to unexpected failures. 20 minutes to intercept, the helmsman reported. Reading elevated radiation levels from the bright future, Brad called out. Consistent with the reactor containment breach. Whatever hit them, it hit hard. Life signs? Difficult to determine through the radiation, but preliminary scans suggest 7 to 12 individuals aboard. Can't get precise numbers until we're closer. Alex made a decision. Prepare boarding party. Full radiation gear, rescue equipment, and emergency life support packages. If their ship is dying, we extract survivors and deal with the diplomatic aftermath later. Commander, regulations require we wait for consul authorization before boarding their vessels, Megan reminded him. Regulations also say we render aid to any ship in distress. And if I let people die while waiting for permission slips, I don't deserve this uniform. Prep the boarding party. The Explorer-class vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel 10,000 kilometers from the bright future. Visual sensors showed a ship that looked like it had been through a war. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. Scorch marks covered the exterior. One entire section appeared to be simply gone, sheared away by some tremendous force. That wasn't a reactor failure, Brad said grimly. That was weapons fire. Multiple hits from what looks like plasma batteries and kinetic impactors. Pirates? Alex suggested, though he knew better. Space piracy was theoretically possible, but incredibly rare. The distances involved made most targets not worth the effort. Or someone testing whether killing consul diplomats would trigger a response, Brad said. Either way, we need to get those survivors out now. The boarding party launched in a shuttle, crossing the distance in minutes. Alex watched from his command chair as cameras mounted in their suits transmitted the horror waiting aboard the bright future. Bodies floating in zero gravity, Centaur crew killed by explosive decompression and massive trauma, ruptured systems sparking in the vacuum, and in a sealed emergency compartment near the ship's center, 5 survivors huddled in radiation suits, their vital signs failing. This is Parker to boarding team status? We've got survivors, came the response from Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, leading the boarding party. 5 Centaur, all in critical condition. Moving them to the shuttle now. But, Commander, you need to see this. One of the boarding team's cameras focused on a section of wall. Even through the damage and debris, the markings were unmistakable. Weapon signatures that didn't match any known console design. The pattern of damage suggested an ambush, ships appearing from nowhere, hitting fast and hard, then disappearing before help could arrive. Get our people and the survivors back here immediately, Alex ordered. Brad sweep the surrounding space. I want to know if whoever did this is still watching. Already scanning, Brad replied. Getting some weird readings from the gas giant's upper atmosphere. Could be natural electromagnetic interference, or could be cloaked ships. Recommend we extract and withdraw at a minimum safe distance. The shuttle returned with 5 unconscious Centaur and a boarding team that looked shaken. Alex met them in the medical bay as the ship's doctor and medics worked frantically to stabilize the survivors. Talk to me, Alex said to Sarah. It was an execution, she said flatly. Someone came out of nowhere, hit them with enough firepower to cripple the ship, then left them to die slowly. The emergency beacon was damaged in the initial attack, so it took hours before it managed to get a signal out. If we'd been any later, they'd all be dead. Any idea who did it? Sarah shook her head. Weapon signatures don't match console standard. But that doesn't mean much. Could be pirates with modified weapons. Could be a species not in the database. Or could be someone with a grudge against the Centaur specifically. The ship's doctor approached, her expression grim. 3 are stable. 2 are critical, but might make it if we can get them to a proper medical facility. They're asking for you, Commander. Alex followed her to where the most stable survivor was regaining consciousness. The small Centaur looked up at him with huge eyes that conveyed pain and gratitude simultaneously. You are human, the Centaur whispered through a translator. Yes. I'm Commander Alex Parker. You're safe now. Safe, the Centaur repeated, and something that might have been laughter emerged. We were told humans could be trusted. That despite your youth, your species understood honor. I am glad Ambassador Pip was correct. What happened to your ship? We were mapping the system as part of standard expansion surveys. A ship appeared. No identification. No warning. They fired on us, disabled our drives, breached our hull. Then they just left, watching from a distance as we died. The Centaur coughed, a wet sound that made the doctor flinch. I saw their hull markings before I lost consciousness. They were Kryn. The warrior species represented on your first delegation. Alex felt his blood run cold. The Kryn were consul members. If they'd attacked a Centaur diplomatic vessel, that meant internal conflict, faction fighting, maybe even civil war brewing, and humanity was caught right in the middle of probationary membership with no clear allegiance to any side. Rest now, he told the Centaur. We'll get you to safety and sort this out. But even as he said it, Alex knew the situation had just become infinitely more complicated. The Rian cruiser would arrive soon asking questions. Earth would need answers. And somewhere in the consul's vast political machinery, someone had just tried to murder diplomats and frame it as an accident. The real test of humanity's place in the galaxy wasn't cooperation or technology exchange. It was navigating a political minefield where one wrong step could mean war, and staying neutral might be the most dangerous choice of all. 6 months after the Kepler system incident, Earth found itself hosting an emergency consul summit. The attack on the bright future had shattered the illusion of consul unity, revealing fault lines that had been growing for centuries. Species that had joined willingly versus those absorbed through coercion. Military powers like the Kryn who valued strength versus diplomatic species like the Centaur who valued cooperation. And newer members who questioned whether the old hierarchy still made sense. Commander Jake Murphy, the man who'd started this whole mess with his ultimatum 3 years ago, stood in Geneva's main conference hall and wondered how humanity had become the neutral ground for galactic civil war negotiations, probably because they were the only species everyone else was scared of, which was flattering and terrifying in equal measure. Ambassador Kelth approached, his reptilian form moving with the careful precision of someone navigating extremely dangerous political waters. Commander Murphy, good to see you again, though I wish the circumstances were more pleasant. Ambassador, Jake acknowledged. Any progress on identifying who actually ordered the attack? Progress, yes. Answers no. The Kryn government denies any involvement, claiming the attacking ship was operated by rogue elements. However, evidence suggests at least tacit official approval, and the Centaur are understandably unwilling to accept denials without concrete proof and accountability. So, you've got 2 member species on the brink of war, and you're hoping humanity can somehow mediate. Not just mediate, Kelth said. We need a perspective that isn't entangled in millennia of consul politics. Your species is young enough to see the situation clearly, yet respected enough that both sides might actually listen. Respected because they're afraid we'll blow up their ships if they ignore us, Jake said dryly. Fear and respect are often intertwined, Kelth replied. The question is whether humanity is mature enough to leverage that fear constructively. The summit began with all the ritual and formality that multi-species diplomacy required. 50 different delegations, representing civilizations spanning millions of worlds, gathered to address a question that went far beyond one attack. Was the consul still functioning as intended? Or had it become a comfortable fiction allowing old powers to maintain control while newer members chafed under restrictions they hadn't agreed to? Secretary General Helen Martinez opened with characteristically blunt assessment. We're here because someone attacked a diplomatic vessel, nearly killed its crew, and thought they could get away with it. But we're really here because that attack exposed problems you've all been ignoring for too long. The consul isn't working. At least, not for everyone. Ambassador Threll's crystalline form shifted through agitated colors. Humanity has been a member for barely 3 years, and already you presume to lecture civilizations that have maintained galactic peace for epochs. Peace? Helen replied. Is that what you call it when species are absorbed against their will? When newer members have restricted rights compared to founding species? When military powers can attack diplomatic vessels with only token consequences? That's not peace. That's enforced stability maintained through threat of overwhelming force. Better than chaos, Threll insisted. Before the Council, the galaxy was consumed by endless warfare. Species fought over resources, territory, and ideological differences. The Council ended that by making everyone too scared to fight, Jake interjected from his position near the wall. Or too weak to matter. You didn't end conflict. You just monopolized it. Drac, the armored Kryn warrior, actually laughed. The human speaks truth. We joined the Council because the alternative was annihilation. But we maintained our military traditions, our warrior culture, because we knew that surrendering all capacity for violence meant surrendering all ability to resist. The Centaur think diplomacy can solve everything. We know better. So you attacked diplomatic vessels to prove your point? Pip asked quietly. The small Centaur's voice carried throughout the chamber, despite their size. You murder my people to demonstrate that military strength matters more than cooperation? We attacked nothing, Drake growled. A rogue ship operated by extremists who don't speak for the Kryn government. We have already executed those responsible and offered reparations. Convenient that the extremists are all dead and can't contradict your version of events, Helen said. And convenient that executing them means you don't have to explain how rogue elements got access to military-grade weapons and intelligence on diplomatic courier routes. The chamber erupted in argument, species shouting at each other in dozens of languages, translators struggling to keep up with overlapping accusations and denials. Jake watched it all with the detached interest of someone realizing they were witnessing history. The console was tearing itself apart, and nobody seemed capable of stopping it. He caught Helen's eye and gave a subtle nod. Time for humanity to show what they'd learned from 3 years of probationary membership. Helen stood and activated a signal that sent harmonic feedback through every translator in the room, forcing silence through sheer discomfort. Enough. You're all missing the point. This isn't about who attacked the bright future. It's about why someone felt that was necessary in the first place. Explain, Kelth said, grateful for the intervention. The console was created to maintain peace and stability. Noble goals. But somewhere along the way it became more important to preserve the console itself than to serve the species within it. Newer members are restricted to prevent them from challenging established powers. Military forces are centralized to prevent anyone from posing a threat to the status quo, and dissent is managed through political maneuvering that ensures nothing ever fundamentally changes. She pulled up holographic data, centuries of console history condensed into clear patterns. Look at the membership expansion over the last 1,000 years. Early on, the console grew rapidly as species voluntarily joined. But in the last 5 centuries, growth has stalled. Almost no new voluntary members. Instead, you've been absorbing species during crisis periods when they're too weak to refuse. Because true civilization must be preserved, Threll insisted. Species left to develop independently often destroy themselves or pose threats to galactic stability. Or they might compete with you, Jake said. Might develop different solutions to the same problems. Might refuse to accept that your way is the only way, and that can't be allowed because it threatens the hierarchy you've spent millennia establishing. Vess pulsed with agitated bioluminescence. What solution do humans propose? Dissolve the console and return to pre-civilization chaos? No, Helen said. We propose actually making the console live up to its founding principles. Equal representation for all members regardless of age or size. Autonomous military forces under species control with mutual defense treaties. Technology sharing without restrictions or hierarchies. And the ability to leave if a species decides membership isn't working for them. Those are the terms you requested for Earth's probationary membership, Kelth noted. And you rejected them as impossible, Helen agreed. But maybe impossible is exactly what the console needs. Because the alternative is slow disintegration. As more species realize they're not partners in galactic governance, they're subjects in a very old empire. The chamber fell silent. Helen had just articulated what many delegations had been thinking but didn't dare say. The console had become what it was created to prevent. A hierarchical power structure that maintained control through military might and political manipulation. Tyrell said finally, to treat species who barely understand faster-than-light travel as equals to those who have mastered quantum manipulation and dimensional engineering. I'm asking you to decide whether the console is a partnership or an empire, Helen replied. Because if it's an empire, say so honestly. Stop pretending that newer members have agency. Stop claiming that integration is voluntary when the alternative is isolation and vulnerability. Just admit you're an empire and govern accordingly. And if we do? Drake asked, genuinely curious. Then humanity leaves, Jake said flatly. We'll take our chances as an independent power. Maybe we'll survive, maybe we won't. But we'll do it on our terms rather than accepting subordinate status in someone else's hierarchy. Others will follow, Pip said softly. Species who join because they had no choice will see that refusal is possible. The console will fragment and the galactic order will collapse. Or transform, Helen suggested. Maybe what emerges from that collapse is something better. A voluntary alliance of equal partners rather than a forced confederation of unequal members. Maybe that's worth the risk. Kelth stood, drawing all attention. Secretary General Martinez, you have given this assembly much to consider. I propose we adjourn for one local day while delegations consult with their governments. When we reconvene, we will vote on a fundamental question. Does the Council continue as currently structured, or do we attempt the reformation you propose? The motion passed unanimously. Nobody wanted to make that decision without considerable thought and consultation. As the delegates filed out, Jake found himself standing with Helen, Admiral Price, and several other human representatives. "Think they'll actually change?" Price asked. "Some will push for it," Helen said. "Species like the Centaur who have always valued cooperation. Maybe even some of the older powers who are tired of maintaining control through threat rather than genuine partnership. But others will fight it because admitting the system is broken means admitting they've been complicit in oppression." "So what do? "We wait," Jake said. "We've made our position clear. Now we see if the galaxy is ready to evolve, or if we're about to start a civil war that makes the Kepler system attack look like a minor disagreement." Above Geneva, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the political turmoil of species trying to figure out how to coexist. But somewhere in that vast darkness, billions of beings were making decisions that would shape the future of galactic civilization. And humanity, barely 3 years into their probationary membership, had just put their finger on the scale. The vote came down to numbers that would be debated by historians for generations. 247 species voted for reformation. 203 voted to maintain current structures. 38 abstained, either unable to decide or unwilling to commit to either side. The Council would attempt to transform itself from empire to partnership, equal representation, autonomous military forces, unrestricted technology sharing, and the right to leave without consequence. It was, by any reasonable assessment, insane. Civilizations didn't just voluntarily surrender power because someone asked nicely, but the alternative was civil war. And even the most cynical species recognized that such a conflict would leave everyone weaker. Ambassador Kelf found Jake Murphy standing on the observation deck of the human delegation's quarters, looking up at the stars. "Commander, may I join you?" "It's your galaxy," Jake replied. "I'm just visiting." "Not anymore. As of today's vote, humanity's probationary period is officially ended. You are full members of the Galactic Council with all rights and responsibilities that entails." Jake turned, surprised. "We've only served 3 of the 50 years. The vote to reform the Council included provisions allowing any species that supported reformation to bypass remaining probationary requirements. Earth's delegation was instrumental in pushing for change. It would be hypocritical to deny you the benefits of that change." "Instrumental or just loud and annoying enough that giving us full membership was easier than listening to us complain?" Jake asked dryly. Kelth's translator approximated a chuckle. "Perhaps both. Your species has a remarkable talent for making uncomfortable truths impossible to ignore. But tell me, Commander Murphy, do you believe this reformation will actually work?" Jake considered the question seriously. "I think it'll be chaos for a while. Species testing boundaries, figuring out what equal representation actually means. Probably some conflicts as old grudges surface without the Council's heavy hand keeping everyone in line." "That sounds pessimistic." "That sounds realistic," Jake corrected. "But chaos isn't necessarily bad. Sometimes systems need to break down before they can be rebuilt properly, and maybe a galaxy where species can be honest about their conflicts is healthier than one where everyone pretends to cooperate while plotting against each other." "You have an unusual perspective for a species so young." "We have an unusual history," Jake replied. "Humanity has spent 10,000 years fighting ourselves, making mistakes, learning hard lessons about power and freedom and cooperation. We've tried empires, democracies, theocracies, anarchies, and everything in between. Most of them failed eventually. The ones that survived were the ones that could adapt, that could admit when things weren't working and try something different." He turned back to the stars. "The Council lasted longer than any human civilization. But lasting isn't the same as thriving. You've got hundreds of species held together by rules nobody agreed to and traditions that don't make sense anymore. That was always going to break eventually. Better to break it deliberately and rebuild than to have it shatter catastrophically when someone finally got fed up enough to start shooting. You think the Kryn attack on the bright future was inevitable? I think it was a symptom. If it hadn't been them, it would have been someone else, some other species or faction that decided violence was the only language the Council understood. And they wouldn't have been wrong, because the Council was built on the implicit threat that resistance would be crushed." Kelth was quiet for a long moment. "We thought we were building peace. A galactic civilization where species could coexist without the warfare that characterized early space exploration. But perhaps we built a prison instead, one with very comfortable cells." Maybe, Jake acknowledged. Or maybe you built something that worked for its time and now needs to evolve. That's not failure, that's adaptation. The question is whether you can adapt fast enough to avoid collapse. And will humanity help with that adaptation? Or will you watch from the sidelines ready to say, I told you so, if we fail? Jake smiled. We'll help. Not because we're particularly noble or enlightened, but because we're stuck in this galaxy with all of you. If the console fails, if galactic civilization collapses into warfare, Earth is right in the middle of it. So yeah, we'll help. We'll push and complain and force uncomfortable conversations. We'll share what we've learned from our own history, both the successes and the failures. And we'll stand with species that want genuine cooperation instead of enforced stability. That is all anyone can ask. Kelth departed, leaving Jake alone with the stars. Somewhere out there on billions of worlds, beings were learning that their galaxy had fundamentally changed. Some would celebrate, others would resist, and many would simply try to navigate the uncertainty as best they could. But Earth had done what it set out to do. They'd forced the galaxy to acknowledge that humans existed, that they mattered, and that they would not be pushed around. The rest was just figuring out how to live with the consequences of that choice. Jake pulled out a small data pad, composing a message to the families of the 47 volunteers who died, proving humanity couldn't be ignored. Their sacrifice had bought Earth 3 years of peace to prepare. Now that preparation would be tested as humanity navigated a galactic civilization trying to transform itself. You did good, he said quietly, as if the dead could hear him. We're not done yet, probably never will be. But you gave us a chance. Everything that comes after is our responsibility. The stars offered no response, but Jake didn't need one. He'd delivered his warning to the Galactic Council 3 years ago. They'd ignored it at first, then reluctantly accepted it, and finally embraced the change it represented. Now came the hard part, proving that change was possible, that cooperation could work without coercion, and that a young, stubborn, aggressive species could contribute something valuable to galactic civilization beyond just being difficult. Jake Murphy smiled and headed back to his quarters. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new arguments, new species that needed convincing that humanity's way wasn't crazy. But tonight, he could rest knowing that Earth had accomplished something remarkable. They'd told the galaxy to not mess with Earth. And for once, the galaxy had actually listened.